Hi, this is Kenny. This week we had to read chapter 8, the two kinds of marital conflicts. I will be describing two categories of conflicts. So we know that in every union there's conflicts, marital problems, there's always issues, and sometimes it can be overwhelming and very complex. And although at times we find our marital issues unique, the author here describes that marital conflicts fall into two categories. Either they can be resolved or they can either be perpetual, which means that they will be part of their lives forever and in some way or another. So it's a the way I see it, it's a prolonged problem that is there. So when we decide to choose any of these two types of conflicts, typically we are able to customize coping categories or strategies. I meant to say strategies. So for example, it is said that 69% fall into the perpetual category. Couples typically fight about the same type of problems even if time has passed on. So throughout time, they still have the same issue, the same problem. And typically those couples remain satisfied with their marriages because they have found a way to deal with their problems. And I will call that a coping way or a coping mechanism by having an approach of a sense of humor, for example. So what some couples do is that they keep acknowledging the problem and talking about it, but they prevent it from overwhelming their relationships. So people make the decision to cope by avoiding situations because they don't want it to be worse than what it is. So they develop these strategies and routines so that they can help ease them. And I can give you a personal example. For example, my husband, in the beginning of our marriage, he would never pick up after himself. Like, he is like literally the kind of his culture has been brought up to where men don't pick up after themselves. You know, the woman has to do everything for them. So after dinner, every time I would have to pick up, his plate and take it to the dishwasher or whatever. And we would have arguments at times. And I'd say, hey, you have hands, get up, and come on, help out. But I ended up deciding of not making this a huge conflict. So I had decided to have a coping mechanism to where I said, you know what, it's fine. I'm not gonna argue. I'm not gonna fight. I'll just do it. And he eventually ended up helping out without me arguing or fighting with him. So, that's just a personal example. There's many others that people find ways to cope and avoid having the problem get worse. The idea is that we don't have the perpetual problem like this to eventually hurt our relationships, and that's why a lot of people end up getting divorced. So when people or couples find ways to cope, if they do not find ways to cope, they eventually get gridlocked, and meaning that they talk about this situation over and over, and they just spin their wheels and never resolve anything. And that's what the author was saying, that it's just that the problem is still there, and things don't get resolved. And the risk of this is that, as the author was explaining, the fourth horseman will then rise and present himself when there's consistent argument, leaving the effect of isolation and closing the problem. And basically both eventually decide and agree to just leave it alone and not take into consideration the problem and not talk about it. So finally they have the effect of isolation and not agreeing, and they just stayed like a stone wall, So this is scary because couples do end up gridlocking and in their lives, and that's when the fourth horseman symbolism begins to reflect, to where we know that the fourth horseman mean death. So that means that marriage might end, or marriage is just not a good and happy one. And it's sad because they won't have a happy marriage. So how to avoid gridlocks? Have some motivation and willingness to explore the hidden issues that causes gridlocks. Work together, find ways to significantly understand and work out those indifferences. And finally, once you know that there's no more gridlocks there, you know that there's no more pain, no more gut wrenching, and there's no intense in that relationship. So then you understand, overall, although it's good to find a coping mechanism to remain satisfied in a marriage, it's equally important that both have communication to avoid these gridlocks, and that way there's no resentment in the relationship, and this perpetual problem doesn't occur and continue.